sorry that we got ahead of ourselves a little bit. We were just anxious to get going. Stephanie and I. Okay. If the following veterans are here, would they please come forward? John Chapman. Jim Loney. Arnie Krosh. Pastor Jack Redmond. Richard Vandermillen. Brian Smith. Thank you for inviting me to your church this morning to honor these veterans. And welcome to this Quilts of Valor ceremony, veterans, family, and friends. I'm Cindy Billmeyer, the Iowa coordinator for the Quilts of Valor Foundation. And it is my privilege to be here today to tell you about the Quilts of Valor Foundation, as well as to thank, honor, and to welcome home our veterans who have answered our nation's call to defend our great country. And while each Quilt of Valor is awarded to our veterans, we are also expressing a heartfelt thank you to their wives and families. You may not have been on the battle lines of the seas of the world striving to keep us free, but you were the silent strength during those times and sacrificed just as much, keeping family and home together while your loved ones were away. To paraphrase the poet John Milton, you also served even though you could only stand and wait. So thank you, wives and families, for your service and sacrifices. I'd like to take just a few minutes to tell you about Quilts of Valor and our totally volunteer 501c3 nonprofit organization. Simply stated, our mission is to cover all service members and veterans touched by war with wartime quilts called Quilts of Valor. This foundation is about people and not about politics. Those involved with Quilts of Valor all know the story by heart. In October 2003 in Seaford, Delaware, that was the beginning of what we now know as this foundation. Catherine Roberts, a midwife, a Blue Star mom, and a quilt maker, founded Quilts of Valor Foundation as a result of her eldest son's upcoming deployment to Iraq. I quote Catherine, "This whole thing began with a deployed son and a dream, literally a dream. The dream was as vivid as real life. I saw a young man sitting on the side of his bunk hunched over. It was the middle of the night, and the permeating feeling was one of utter despair. It was as though I could see his war demons clustered around him, dragging him down into an emotional gutter. Then, as if viewing a movie, the next scene was totally transformed. He was wrapped in a quilt. His whole demeanor changed from one of despair to one of hope and well-being, and it was the quilt which made the change," end quote. Catherine began this foundation with the image of a combat warrior struggling with his war demons, and not necessarily his physical wounds. Today we recognize and acknowledge the war demons that survive from all wars. Thousands of quilters nationwide, as well as in Canada, England, and Australia, are hard at work covering warriors from all conflicts, including World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. 2013 was our 10th anniversary. It took Catherine and her little quilting group 3 years to make and award the first 100 quilts. By then, the grassroots movements were spreading across the country as quilters heard about this worthy program and began using their talents to honor the military. Since that first Quilt of Valor was awarded in 2003, quilters have continuously made and awarded Quilts of Valor throughout the United States, up to yesterday, and the total of the Quilts of Valor awarded was 108,271. A Quilt of Valor is not a charity quilt, And a quilt of valor is not a blanket. It's a quilt consisting of 3 layers, and I'd like you to think of the layers in these terms. The top of the quilt with its many colors, shapes, and fabrics represents the community and the many individuals that we are. Each stitch in the quilt represents the love, the gratitude, and sometimes the tears of the maker. The batting is the center of the quilt, and that's its warmth. It represents the hope that this quilt will bring warmth, comfort, peace, and healing to the individual who receives it. And the backing is the strength. It holds many pieces of the quilt together. It represents the strength of the recipient, his faith in his God, his or her family, our communities, and our nation. A quilt of valor is priceless. It can never be bought, and it should never be sold. It's not a birthday gift or a Christmas present. Recipients often state it means more to them than any of the military medals that they receive, because it comes from the heart and the hands of the community. In addition to locally awarded quilts of valor, we make and ship 10% of our quilts to medevac units in Afghanistan, Landstuhl, Germany, and locally stateside to military hospitals and veterans' homes. Wherever the need is greatest, our quilts are there to comfort and heal. You could call it divine intervention or just a feeling, but there is something magical and healing that comes from the folds of these quilts. The mother who finds her son wrapped in his quilt of valor and sleeping the first peaceful night's sleep since returning home from war. The Korean War veteran and the Vietnam veteran who may now feel honored, respected, and recognized for their service and sacrifice. The mother who wrote to thank a Quilt of Valor volunteer with the words, quote, "Your quilt held my son when I wasn't able," quote. And the story repeats itself over and over. Why quilts of valor? Not only to thank and to honor, but also to comfort and hopefully help heal our returning warriors and veterans, many of whom who are haunted with the war demons of their memories. PTSD and TBI are real. Every day, 22 veterans commit suicide, 1 every 65 minutes. 30% of our veterans consider suicide, and most disturbing, 69% of our veterans committing suicide are 50 or older. They are likely to be the Korean or Vietnam veteran who returned from war to a hostile public. Combat stress was ignored or treated as a mental illness, and many of our veterans lived or still live with these ghosts in their heads. A quilt of valor is a healing and a comforting gesture, a tangible thing that they can wrap around themselves and know that someone thinks of them with love and with care. We also do quilts of valor nationwide because there are 22 million living veterans yet to be honored and thanked for their service. I personally do quilts of valor to honor the military veterans of my family who have fought in every war since the Civil War, and I accepted this position as the mother of a soldier injured in combat. My son, Staff Sergeant Richard Wilmeyer, lost his legs in Afghanistan in 2011. He received his quilt of valor in Bagram, Afghanistan, at the Field Surgical Unit where he was first taken for medical care. This is also my way of paying it forward, so some other mother's son or daughter will have the comforting quilt of valor. I would like to end with a few lines from a newspaper article written by David Speck, a Vietnam veteran who served in the Air Force, entitled, "They Were There." They were there during the Great War. They experienced the hell of the trenches, the no man's land, and the poison gas attacks. They were told that this was the war to end all wars. They were there on December 7, 1941, when the Empire of Japan bombed the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. They were there on the battleships, the aircraft carriers, on those God-forsaken Pacific Islands. They were there on D-Day, June 6, 1944. They stormed the beaches of Omaha and Utah. They scaled the cliffs of Pontotoc. They were there with the 101st Airborne at Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. They were there when they liberated the Nazi death camp at Dachau. They flew with the Enola Gay over Hiroshima, where the light of 1,000 suns ushered in the atomic age. They were there on the Korean Peninsula. Names of places and battles like Busan Perimeter, Incheon, the Hwasong Reservoir, and Port Chop Hill became the stories of legend. They were there in the unforgiving jungles of Vietnam. The TV screen brought the war to our very doorstep. We became familiar with battles, places, and names, such as Ai Drang Valley, Khe Sanh, the Tet Offensive, Ho Chi Minh Trail, Mekong Delta, Cambodia, and Laos. And they were there in Iraq and Afghanistan. The gauntlet of war has now passed to a new generation of warriors. These young men and women have been tasked to carry on the legacy of past veterans. And what legacies have these veterans of these many wars and conflicts given us? They have given us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They have preserved the American dream, the American way of life. They have sacrificed much so that the cherished concept of freedom and liberty will forever permeate this great land. They have continued to be the undergirding, the foundation, and the principle on which this great nation was founded. Veteran General Norman S. Schwarzkopf pretty much sums it up. Quote, "It doesn't take a hero to order men into battle. It takes a hero to be one of these men who goes into battle." Unquote. Catherine Roberts envisioned that these Quilts of Valor would be awarded to one specific person and not just passed out like magazines or videos. Each Quilt of Valor is a lifetime award. It is our foundation's equivalent of the Purple Heart. And each Quilt of Valor has a label that specifically says that this Quilt of Valor belongs to you. And so, for our veterans here this morning, though we may never know the depth of your sacrifice to protect and defend the United States of America, as a gesture of gratitude on behalf of the Quilts of Valor Foundation, we award each of you this Quilt of Valor to thank you for your service and sacrifices for our nation. May your Quilt of Valor be healing and comfort when you need it, and a continual reminder that we honor and thank you for your service and sacrifices. So, all right. John Chaplin, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Right there. You stand up. Good enough. Now.
Thank you. Thank you. Always.
Ready? We're not quite coordinated, but we're doing our best here. Jim Loney, United States Navy, Vietnam. Here. He's not going to give him. Oh, you want me to do it? Arnie Prosh, U.S. Navy, Vietnam. Here's Stephanie. By the way, Stephanie and her sisters, Tammy and Regine, made all of these quilts. Pastor Jack Redmond, U.S. Navy, Vietnam. Rich Vandermillen, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Did Brian Smith happen to come in? Wait. Okay. All right. That one's Brian's. Well, anyway. Okay. Well, thank you very much.